Shout out to all the single parents out there. This one's for you. This is part two of how I became a single parent. So if you didn't catch the first video, go on ahead back and take a look at that. But I'm going to pick up where I left off when I told you that there were a million red flags and I was getting married. This is my second marriage that I am speaking about. And in spite of those red flags, I got married anyway. So the first thing I would say that was bad was the entire wedding reception. That was one of the first times where the ugliness that was inside of our families showed up in a way where it affected me to the point to where I was miserable, I was depressed. So it wasn't a fun time at all like it should be. So for example, the people we were supposed to have the reception with ended up backing out of allowing us to come and basically make things beautiful. They just decided, well, no, you can't come. So things were not the way that I would like them to be, especially me being a designer. I have a very specific aesthetic and I'm flexible as far as being a real live person. But we just weren't allowed to come in at all, which was the opposite of what we were told, to decorate the way that we wanted to. We didn't have that kind of support. My sister ended up not coming and attending the wedding at all. Another thing that was really bad was my ex-husband's mother. She showed up with a dress that was showing all of her cleavage. The dress was black. She was in mourning because he was marrying me, which was super upsetting to her. So basically, at the end of the reception, she basically lost it. She just started screaming and hollering. And as we were walking out of the reception on our way to the honeymoon, she just started crying and screaming and grabbed him literally, and his family members had to pull her off. So it was just really the beginning of a lot of struggle, and not the kind of struggle where there's something good at the end. It was just the beginning of a bunch of struggle that really felt like it was just pointless and super unnecessary. So once we got married, the next thing was we were focusing on having a child, because at the time I was about 34. And so I knew that the older that a woman gets, of course, the fewer eggs and it's harder to conceive. So we did not go on birth control. And I'm going to say, let me see, we got married in September. By October, November, December, January, February, March. By March that following year, so that's 6 months later, I was pregnant. The way that I found out I was pregnant, I was so sick. I can't even tell you. I never had felt that way before because I had never been pregnant. And so I said, why don't you go and get me a pregnancy test? Because I literally was throwing up all over the place. I was sweating and I had been pretty healthy, even though I do have sickle cell anemia and I get sick, but it's like a cold. But this was different. My hair changed. It became all stringy and my energy level was super, super low. So I just suspected maybe I'm pregnant because it was something that we were also trying for. And so we got the pregnancy tests and it came back positive. And then I started to really see parts of this situation that I had never seen before. By situation, I mean parts of our relationship. So the first thing was when the test came back positive, I was in the restroom, of course, and you have to pee on a stick and you look to see if it's a plus or if it's a minus. And when I told my ex-husband that I was pregnant, instead of him being happy, which we both agreed to have children, and we both, from my memory, we were both really, really happy to have, or the thought of having children. But once the test came back positive, all that changed for him. And then that affected me negatively. So my perception of him being happy and this being a good thing, and let's not use birth control, maybe it was wrong. Maybe that wasn't his true impression. And maybe he actually didn't want to have kids. But I really do think in my heart that before it happened, he was excited about it. But then after it became a positive test, he actually stood up, went into the bathroom, threw up. He got like pale white. He was like clearly freaked out. And I was just sitting there the whole time, like, but wait, you married me. You said you wanted to have kids. We went off of birth control. Like, I couldn't understand and put it together. So maybe he just had his own freak out moment, which he's a human being and he's allowed. So the next thing that was really disturbing to me, aside from not being happy, I felt like he was more freaked out than happy, was the fact that, and I think maybe he might have a diagnosis that just never was made for the reasons why this happened. But I think the thing that I felt the most hurt by next was the fact that he couldn't support me. So there was no, oh, here, do you need me to make you food or bring you something? Or do you want to lay down? Do you want to take a break? None of that was our situation. Pretty much it was just he was freaked out. And then he spent as much time as possible, I think, going back to his comfort zone. So going back to spending time with his friends and his family, maybe just to calm him down emotionally. But there was no support from me on my end, from my perception. Like, I didn't feel supported. So from there, I was suspicious. That's a good way to say it. I was suspicious that I would not be able to have maybe a full pregnancy and work all the way through right from the beginning. I just had this intuition that something could go wrong, maybe because I have sickle cell anemia, or maybe it's women's intuition. I don't know. But I did tell him, okay, so this is the beginning of a 9-month journey. I don't know if I'm going to be able to work all the way through. So maybe you might want to consider getting a part-time job, or we just need to maybe move someplace else. Let's plan for the worst case scenario so that we're not caught off guard. And at the time, I did not have health insurance. And that was a big issue because I am an adjunct, which is kind of like a freelance instructor. So it doesn't come with health benefits. And I still don't have health benefits. I have to pay out of pocket. So I had also asked him, aside from considering maybe we move, let's cut back on expenses. And I asked also maybe can he get me on his insurance, because he was working full time and he had health insurance. And it was really surprising, but he just said, no, I can't do that. Like, just flat out no. And I was like, that was like a dagger in my heart. I was like, wait, what? You're not willing to go to your boss and say, hey, take more money out of my check and just put my wife on my health insurance? And he really couldn't fathom why I was even asking. He really was just like, no, absolutely not. And so I suspect, because he worked with a lot of Latinos in a Latino company where they spoke Spanish, and they were from different places, Latinos from a lot of different places, but I suspect maybe he thought his boss might be racist. And maybe he thought it would be an issue for him at work. That's the only thing that I could kind of think of as to why he would say just flat out, no, absolutely not. And because the company was very, very grounded in their culture, which is great, in my opinion. And maybe that wasn't it either. I don't know why, but he just said no. So there was no health insurance coming. So I remember crying my eyes out. I just got myself in the car and I said, all right, let me drive and let's see what I can find, just as far as being able to see some type of a clinic that can point me in the right direction. At the time, I was living in North Hollywood, California. And so I drove to Los Angeles. And as I got to Los Angeles, and there goes my dog, as I got to Los Angeles, I couldn't even hardly see. I was just driving and crying and just completely a mess because of the situation. I literally found, I don't know how, a maternity clinic. That was God, 100%. So I went in. I don't even remember what street it was on. I don't know how I even got there. But I went in and I signed up, and they were the ones to care for me for the prenatal portion and to help me through the entire pregnancy and the birth. They set everything up. I then, after I got the clinic, I still felt devastated, but I said, okay, let's make the best of this. Let's move on. Maybe he's feeling weird, or like this is all new and he doesn't know what to do. So let's give him a chance. And I think that's when he went back to drugs and alcohol. So maybe the whole situation he just wasn't ready for emotionally. And I did not have the insight to be able to probe and ask the right questions to see if that was the case. But for whatever reason, then he kind of started to disappear. That's why I say maybe he went back to drugs and alcohol at that time. The next thing, after being pregnant for a couple of months and finding the maternity clinic, I ended up going to one of the last few doctor visits. And the doctor pulled me into the conference room after the visit. And I was like, whoa, what is going on? What is happening? I've never been pulled into a conference room after a doctor visit. And so my ex-husband was there with me. We go into the conference room and the doctor proceeds to tell me that my son had water on the brain. And I was like, what? I mean, that was just another big shocking moment. And so I went and prayed about it. The doctor asked me if I wanted to get rid of to terminate the pregnancy. And I was like, absolutely not. And thankfully today, my son is a happy, healthy 15-year-old. So I'm going to leave it at that, because that's a whole nother story, how everything went down with that. But getting back to some of the other bad things that happened, as I suspected, because he said, no, we're not going to move someplace else, and no, he's not going to get a part-time job, we ended up not having enough money. We lost the place we were living in. The car got repossessed, and he had no idea where we could go. So I asked my dad. My dad at the time lived about maybe an hour and a half away from North Hollywood, and in a little place called Apple Valley. So we ended up moving in with my dad. I was so humiliated. There was no furniture. My dad wasn't prepared for us. And I ended up sleeping with my big belly on the floor many times. Then from there, we moved in with my brother, because that was such a far commute. And from my brother, we moved in with my mom, and it was really just a disaster. There was like no happiness, no, oh, we're pregnant and let's have fun starting off this marriage together. There was none of that. And I wasn't able to work because I just continued to get sick. I mean, like really, really sick. I was swollen beyond belief. I gained so much weight. And now today, I know that there's an epidemic of Black women dying in childbirth. And it's a big issue. So much so that a friend of mine went back to school after getting a doctorate to become an OBGYN, because Black women are struggling to give birth and live through the process. So I realized today that there were so many signs looking back. I wasn't able to breathe constantly. My liver was probably shutting down. The reason I say that is because once I got to the point where I was actually going to deliver the baby, the doctor said to me on a regular visit, hey, you have to stay here. You can't go home, even though our due date is not until another week or so. So on that random visit, I felt like, oh no, all the suspicions and thoughts that I'd had were coming true, that something was really, really, really wrong, even though I didn't know what it was. So basically, the doctor, about a week before my son was going to be born, had me come back in, and he said, okay, you have to just stay here. We're going to do inducing the labor first. We're going to try that method. And I knew in my brain, I don't know why, I knew that I was not going to be able to push a baby out. For some reason, I was very athletic. I did gymnastics, I did dance. I was a cheerleader, like at the top of the pyramid, and you do flips and all that stuff. But I just had a feeling that something wasn't going to go right. And sure enough, after trying to induce labor for about 8 hours, the nurse came in and she said, "You are -5." Now, when you're talking about dilation, you're supposed to go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 10. I was -5 after them giving me medication to induce labor for 8 hours. So all of that started to just really pan out. They decided, all right, we're going to call the doctor and we're going to do an emergency C-section tonight, literally, which ended up being the following morning because they couldn't reach the doctor. So the following morning, which my family was super excited. My mom was thrilled. My sister was thrilled because I'm the only one to have a kid in our family. So this would be the first grandchild. So they were there. And my ex-husband was excited at this point for the baby to come. So everybody was happy at this point, and it was just a matter of, all right, having this emergency C-section. And some of the things that went wrong in that aspect were not being able to feel the medication for the anesthesia. And that's Jake, my dog. I could not feel the anesthesia. So then the doctor had to take me out of the operating room and go back to anesthesiologist. So I had to do that process twice with an epidural. And then I think at that point, everything was fine as far as them being able to proceed with the emergency C-section. We delivered the baby and the baby was healthy. That was my biggest concern. I, on the other hand, I had had protein in my urine, so I had something called preeclampsia, which is kind of a sign of your kidneys starting to fail and your organs shutting down. And I started bleeding out. But the baby was healthy, but I had mad problems, and I will insert a picture. Oh my goodness. You could see that I was in distress from this photo, but my baby was healthy. So that's all I really could care about. And eventually, I would get better very slowly, but I would get better eventually. So once I had the baby, I struggled and worked as hard as I could. There was no breast milk because I was that sick. My body wasn't producing it. So we struggled, but I ended up going back to my mom's couch and finding formula and living there. Obviously still not able to work because I was still super sick. And my ex-husband was just going to his job daily to do the best that he could. So we had the baby. We're back at my mom's house. And then I decided, oh my goodness. I decided I am super sick. I'm living on my mom's couch. I'm 35 years old. I don't know what's going on. My husband is in and out as far as he's consistently here, but he's in and out as far as emotionally being present. I was suspecting drug use and alcohol abuse. So I just decided, all right, I'm going to move forward and do my best. And then everything else is just going to have to work itself out. I'm farsighted. So these are my glasses. Sometimes I just put them here just now. If you're wondering why are glasses there, because I can see far away, but I cannot see up close very well. And I wanted to see the camera a little better a few moments ago. So I just pushed pause and grabbed my glasses. But anyway, that's why they're here. So I just decided I'm going to work and move forward. So in 3 months after I gave birth to my son, I was back at work. Yep, at the Fashion Institute, teaching classes. Trust me, it was not easy, but I just decided this is not me. I can't live here. I can't be on my mom's couch. I'm highly capable. I just told myself, even though I had no support and I felt terrible. But I just decided I'm going to do something about this. So from there, we moved to Pasadena, which I just decided I think Pasadena is beautiful and I'm going to move there. And we ended up living on a friend's couch for maybe about a month in Pasadena. And then I had enough money to move into an apartment. And then we moved into an apartment in Pasadena. And it was at that point when things started to turn around financially, because I said, there's no way I'm going to have this baby and he's going to, go to a school that's terrible because I didn't provide the right money for him, the right surroundings for him, etc. So I just said, you know what? My goal this year is to make as much money as I can. And I set it at $100,000. And so then I started teaching at the art center. I started teaching at a small little school in Van Nuys. I just said, I'm going to teach every job that I can possibly teach. And I teach fashion design, so they're not that many. But I said, I'm going to find every program that I can find. I was teaching at Trade Tech, at all these different jobs at the same time, because I said, there's no way I'm going to be poor and be living in this little tiny apartment and raise my kid and have him live a substandard life because I didn't have it together. So that's what I did. I got to work, and I was working so much and so hard I would literally just come in from one job and go out to the next, literally just to make the ends meet. And because it just seemed like there was a hole, like money was just like flying through a hole. He was working full time and I was working 5 million jobs, even though they were all adjunct or freelance, but still it seemed like there was not enough money. And so at that point, I decided to make a change. And I said, well, hey, do you want to stay home? Because I have a bachelor's and an associate's, and he was complaining that he never even finished high school and he wanted to go back to college. So I said, hey, do you want to stay home and take care of our son? And then I will just add more work and just figure things out financially. And he was like, yes, let's do it. So we did that. He became my son's full-time care provider. And I fully believe men can do that. I don't believe for 1 minute that only a woman can be the care provider. I do believe women and men nurture differently, but they both can still nurture. So, and I had a son. My son was born, not a girl. It was a boy. So I was like, great. Dad and son can have time to bond together. So I was all for it. Well, as it turns out, that was the worst idea possible, because while I was at work, I get a phone call. And now as a teacher, as an instructor, you cannot, it doesn't matter what age group, you just cannot be on your phone in any classroom, whether it's college or first grade. There's no way a teacher can just be on a cell phone for a personal call in a classroom. But I saw that it was my son's doctor. My son's doctor called me to tell me that I needed to come in for my son's next visit. And I thought, what is going on? So I just told the doctor, his dad takes him to all his visits and I work full time and the dad is at home. So he's going to have to arrange the appointment. And the doctor told me no. She said, you need to come. And so I managed to squeeze in some time. I was like, all right, I'm going to figure this out. And I went to the next doctor visit without dad. And it's incredible even that this was able to happen. But the doctor told me that my son had fallen off of the growth curve. I was like, wait, what? What do you mean he's fallen off of the growth curve? She said he's not being fed. Now, he was bottle fed. He had formula because I didn't produce any milk because I was so ill. But apparently he was not doing it. So then at that point, I said, okay, something needs to happen and we need to make a big change. And the change that we made, I said, all right, instead of you, Dad, being full time, let's switch it. You go back to work and I will find, my mom can take care of him. My mom and my sister can take care of him. I'll find some kind of part-time childcare, but you can't just continue to not feed him. And he never said he was not feeding him, but he actually never said anything otherwise. So when I told him what the doctor told me, he was just like, oh, okay. And I said, all right, so we can't have it the way it is. He was just saying, oh, okay. So he never really like denied anything, although he never actually admitted to how he was caring for him. But basically, my son was not being fed and he'd fallen off of the growth curve. And the doctor was concerned. She said, my babies don't fall off growth curves. She said, that is unusual, and especially here in the United States, because he can eat and he's willing to eat. He doesn't have any kind of an issue. So it's the care providing. So then I really kind of felt helpless at that point, but I said, you know what, let's find the childcare and let's just make that work. In my heart, though, have you ever felt in your heart like you have to have a brave face? So here's the brave face up front, like, okay, we're going to do this. This is the plan. But deep inside of your heart, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm helpless. I don't even know what to do. And I'm so sorry. And how do I make this up to my baby? That was how I was feeling on the inside, but I just kept pushing through. And a bright spot came. My mom told me, she came over, she was taking care of my son, and she said, you know what? Let's get in the car. Let's go and take a drive. You need to move. I said, Mom, yeah, but I'm not in a position yet to be able to afford anything that I would like to be able to move into. She was like, let's just take a ride anyway. Kid you not. And this was the time when I really needed the bright spot. We get in the car, we start driving around. I'm not that familiar with Pasadena because I'm still very new at this time to the city of Pasadena. We'd only been living there for maybe, I don't know, 9 months. At this point, my son was still a toddler. Maybe he wasn't even toddler. Maybe he was like 1 or 9 months to 1 year old, somewhere in there. But we start driving, we get out, we see a house, and I was like, oh, that's really cute. It's a little pink house. And my mom said, let's just go walk around and see what we can find. There happened to be a person there who was the custodian of the property. And he starts talking to my mom. They hit it off. They know the same areas. They apparently were around the same places when they were growing up. We're from Ohio and he was from Ohio and he knew some of those areas. And then the custodian says, well, the owner's going to be here. And then the next thing I know, the owner rents the cutest 2-bedroom cottage to us, just like that, on the spot. I had no idea. This was in South Lake Avenue, which is apparently a very nice district. But in my head, remember, I was still like reeling from all these things that had been happening. And my heart was still sad that my son had fallen off the growth curve. So I wasn't even really present. But just like that, I went from living in a 2nd story, which is terrible for a toddler, 1-bedroom apartment, and my neighbor was a smoker, to living in a beautiful 2-bedroom cottage just overnight because my mom said, let's just go do something. So that was really a bright spot. So we moved into the 2-bedroom cottage, but guess how we moved into the 2-bedroom cottage? Because I still didn't have all the money that I needed at that time. Well, my boss came to me at one of the schools I was teaching at, and she said, hey, I have an emergency. Somebody can't do a such and such class, and really you're not supposed to teach this many hours, but I can make an exception. And because of that, that was how I was able to afford to move in, because I was the only one working at that time. And the caveat was, I told her, yes, I'll absolutely do it. Not so much thinking about the money, but the caveat for me was that I would not be getting paid right away because it had to go through extra paperwork. So it would be a delay. But of course, that bright spot, that delay showed up exactly at the right timing when that man was going to rent us that house. I got I think it was like a $6,000 check or something all at one time. And we were moved in. So then I thought, okay, that was a bright spot. This is good. Maybe things can be better. Unfortunately, that did not happen. So then we lived there for about a year and things were okay. They were kind of more stable, but there was the drug and alcohol suspicion that we were dealing with still between us. Like I would be having these conversations with him and asking him and he'd be denying it. But we were stable. And I decided, here I go again with the decision. I decided, okay, it's going to be time for us to really push forward, and we're not getting anywhere in this me asking you back and forth. So we're going to need to make some changes. So the changes that I was getting ready to make was I was about to demand that he goes to, what is that treatment? Like a center where they can help you. What's that called? Rehab. And he fought it like crazy. But then another thing bad happened. My mom was really thrilled. She had spent all this whole year with her first grandbaby, and probably her last, she figured, um, because my siblings were not having any kids. And I had such trouble delivering that I figured I probably wouldn't be able to have another. But she started to get sick. And so she called me one day and she was like, I'm so sorry, but I can't come to David's birthday party. That's my son. Now, he was the joy of her life. So the fact that she could not get out of bed and come to his party, and I thought she had had a bad cold, that fact was really a red flag. So she could not come to his party. She called her doctor. He basically said, you have a cold, and she had heart disease already. So he said, just lay in bed, take it easy, let's let it pass. The next thing I know, couple of months went by. The cold never went away. The cold was so bad that we called the ambulance and she had to be rushed to the emergency room. She gets to the emergency room and the doctors say she didn't have a cold. Her heart is infected. So because the doctor just told her she had a cold and he wouldn't see her, it got so bad that it infected her. And she had had previously a mitral valve replacement. And so that valve was infected and it was in her bloodstream. The infection got that bad. So now I'm running around still because I'm the only one working from all these different jobs and, trying to find childcare for my son, trying to make things work. But the bright spot was that nice new cottage that we had moved into. But the reality was I wasn't there to enjoy it because I felt so much stress and I was always working. And then the doctor said my mom's going to need to have a second surgery. So we go to the hospital. She's getting ready to have a second surgery. She comes out of the surgery. The doctor says it's touch and go, but she's okay for now. And then she went on a series of ups and downs in her recovery. So one minute she'd be fine and stable. The next minute the nurse would come in and find her not responding at all, totally unconscious. And then the next day she'd be okay again. So this went back and forth, up and down. And in the meantime, I'm driving from one school to the next to the hospital. My sister's doing the same. She had her job, then she would go to the hospital. Then she would go back to her job and back to the hospital. So we just did that for 6 months. So it was so grueling. She went in the hospital in January, and on her birthday, June 13th, she went in a coma and she never came out. Now, the doctor said basically if she had been seen earlier when she had the cold in the beginning, probably wouldn't have happened. Nothing's guaranteed, but I was just really devastated by such nonsense and just the lack of care that she was able to get. So because she never came out of the coma that final time, the doctor told me I would have to make the decision to pull the plug. My siblings were like, you do it. I can't even do it. I can't deal with it. And I understand because it's a lot. And so I made the decision. I thought about it. I prayed about it, of course, and I made the decision, and it was the worst thing ever for me to decide, yeah, we're going to end her life, because that's not really a decision for me to make. But the reason why I made the decision is because I talked to my sister. She's older than me by 6 years. And she'd said, you know what? We prayed, and meaning she and my mom, We prayed and we said, if you're still here in this hospital by your birthday, we're going to ask Jesus to take you away. So June 13th was her birthday, and she went into a coma and never came out. And so I said, all right, thank you for telling me that. And I made the decision, and they pulled the plug. And watching her die was so hard and so, I can't even describe it. It was the worst thing ever. But while I was walking away from the room, because you don't want your loved ones to be sick, so I knew she would be better off. And she really loved God. But still, I felt that awful, the worst feeling ever is losing a parent. For me, I guess. I don't know. I've never lost a child, thankfully. But I feel like that's the worst kind of pain you can ever have. Nobody loves you like your mom. Like, seriously, nobody loves you like your mom. And I knew, where would I ever get that kind of love again? So I was devastated. But then at the same time, she was free. And she wasn't in pain and she wasn't suffering. So, there is that balance of she was better off, even though I felt like that was the worst thing ever that could happen in my whole life. But one thing that happened that was so bright and so unexpected was, as I was walking away, I got to the elevator. It was like I was awake, but I wasn't present. I was like dreaming, like daydreaming. I don't even know how to explain it, but I'm in the elevator. And all of a sudden, I just see a scene, and it was my mom, and she was about 10 years old. And I knew it was her, but I hadn't really seen pictures of her as a 10-year-old. So I don't know how I knew. I just knew it was her. And she was running across like a meadow. And on the other side, there was a shadowy figure, and he had his arms out. And I could tell that she was running toward it. And so it just brought me so much joy to see that. And it just was like a flash. I was just standing there pushing the button, waiting to go down back to the parking lot. And I just saw that image. And there she was, this 10-year-old girl. And she was so healthy and happy. And she was running across the field. And literally on the other side, there was like this shadowy figure with arms open waiting for her. And so that was the release that I needed, even though it didn't make it easy in that moment. But I knew that she was in a better place, and I knew that she was going to be able to just be at peace forever. And so that was really my the best thing, and my source of peace was knowing that for her.